First off, philosophy is a confession.
We are attracted to men that fulfill their potential. If your motivation for becoming rich is getting more women, you have to think about the quality of women. If it takes money to access her, you are replaceable.
I want to start with a quote from you, if I may. What social media is doing, what this woke culture is doing, is destroying femininity and replacing it with narcissism and telling them that's feminism. And you've also said that modern dating is just training for divorce. Now, if you had to get specific, what problems is modern dating creating exactly? And if you could control the social media algorithms, what values would you want to present to people to make them better at romantic relationships?
What an amazing question. Thank you for asking such an insightful question. I think what's happened, and I don't mean to blame the audience, the reality is we're not designed for this level of exposure to human beings as we are being exposed to in this current climate. We have social media, we have internet, we have dating apps, we have the ability to get webcam girls, pornography. We have such an exposure to humans that we've never been able to do, or nor are we prepared for. So what's happened is when it comes to forming relationships, it's done the opposite. What it's done is made people crave connections but have no idea where to start and how to connect. So the reality is, what I mean when I say we've turned narcissism into and labeled it as feminism, unfortunately the advent of social media has accelerated the status of women far more than it has for men. What social media has done is allowed women a platform to kind of showcase their body, their preferences, basically put themselves on the marketplace. Men don't really have that same access, so we're creating that division between them. And what it's done is allowed women to leverage their beauty in a way that they've never been able to do before. Before, if you were a beautiful girl, you were just beautiful in your city, and people would like you, but you'd marry the guy in the city and you'd have a great life. Unfortunately, now if you're a beautiful girl, you can be a beautiful girl to the world, and you can have 1 million followers. So it makes every man disposable. Any man she's with essentially becomes disposable. So unfortunately, what's happening is women are learning that they become this almost like a deity in terms of beauty in a way that they've never had before. So that's what I think is happening for women. In terms of men, the main problem that's occurring is the access to pornography and the access to beautiful women. What that is doing is them seeing all these beautiful girls, thinking, I want those girls, but I don't want rejection. So what I'll do is find a way to access those girls, and it comes in the form of pornography or webcams or anything like that. So what's happening is we're distancing the sexes from each other through the advent of the internet. And if I could control the algorithm, I would wish there was a way of people being as honest and sincere as they possibly could be, and removing the idea of trying to protect themselves in the form of idolizing money or sex, because that's usually what people are doing. They're protecting themselves. They're going into relationships saying, I just want someone rich. Or a man is protecting his ego saying, I just want someone who's good at sex. They don't really want to get vulnerable with each other. I wish people could put that aside and put their true values of vulnerability and authenticity as a forefront, and then the algorithm could find them somebody along those lines rather than feeding their ego.
It's an amazing breakdown of the problem set. What's the point of a relationship?
I would imagine the point of a relationship is to kind of create a shared meaning and purpose. Now, throughout history, that's always been to create a family, like a shared meaning and purpose, but it doesn't have to be primarily a family. I've noticed in couples that don't embark on a family, they find a shared meaning and purpose in the form of a business or in the form of shared extended families. Maybe their brothers and sisters get on really well, maybe they have nieces and nephews or whatever. They create a shared meaning and purpose. Now, relationships which lack a shared meaning and purpose in the form of either parenting or same values or anything, they tend to end up drifting apart. So the purpose of a relationship is somebody that you can enjoy life with whilst maintaining a shared purpose and meaning that is aligned to one another.
I have a growing thesis about why modern dating is as problematic as it is. What is it about social media? I had never come to the conclusion that this is access to too many people problem. The thing that I worry about is that what the algorithms end up doing is they hyper fragment us so that whether it's OnlyFans or pornography, you're able to pick a very narrow thing that you want, and you can indulge so deeply in that thing that you lose sight of what you're calling shared meaning and purpose. I always think of it as shared narratives.
Okay.
If we don't share an understanding of what the purpose of a relationship is, then we're approaching the problem with a distorted frame of reference. Now, my audience has heard me talk a lot about frame of reference, but just to set the table for this conversation, so your frame of reference is the distorted lens through which you view the entire world.
Right.
There's no way for it not to be distorted. Without getting into postmodernism, while I violently disagree with the postmodernist interpretation of the world, I understand how they end up going down that path, because identifying what is objectively true is very difficult when we have a brain that has to simplify the world. And to simplify it, it basically creates a simulation.
Right.
And so we view the simulation and mistake it for objective reality.
Right.
So the algorithms allow you to really unintentionally get this hyper distorted view of what the world is, what women is, what a relationship is, what sex is, but you don't realize it's happening.
Right.
So you don't realize that you're
It's
coming to a
distorted.
conclusion about what a relationship is. It just happens.
Right.
And so you get the red pill, or
Right.
you get the black pill,
Yeah.
right? And you get people that have a very unhelpful setup in terms of, if you're right and relationships are about shared meaning and purpose, I think you and I would both agree that the North Star, when you think about living your life well, is human flourishing.
Yeah.
What is going to, it's not happiness, I call it fulfillment, but if you think of it as what's going to make me feel good in the widest variety of situations possible, that sort of gets you in the right direction. So this hyper-fragmentation, creation of a distorted lens by which you value what relationships are, then lead people down a road where they don't flourish.
Right.
So it's interesting that you singled in on this idea of shared meaning and purpose. So if we have access to too many people, how do we begin building shared meaning and purpose when we get together in relationships?
Well, the thing is, unfortunately, we have to look at our values. And once we know what our values are, we have to start learning to reject rather than glorifying the one ingredient we like. So what I mean by that is, say, for example, I meet a man who just glorifies beauty. Having a beautiful partner, it monopolizes his brain. So what will happen is he might meet a beautiful woman, and the beauty of her will allow him to kind of submit to all of her demands, no matter how unreasonable they are. So she might be asking for more money than he's prepared to give, or she might be disrespectful, she might be cheating on him, she might be doing this. They're forgetting all of what the ingredients a healthy relationship looks like and focusing on an egotistical desire. Similarly, if a man has money, a woman might ignore all of the other red flags and just glorify this one extrinsic trait. So what I would say is, if you want to start a healthy relationship, make sure you have a balance of values, what you really look for in a relationship rather than what you look for to boost your ego. The people that glorify one ingredient tend to have lacked that at some stage in their life, or lacked access to that at some stage. So they glorify it and they allow all other behaviors to be ignored. But then it eventually leads to a divorce. It eventually leads to children's homes being broken down. It eventually leads to people being crippled in the future when it comes to starting relationships again. It's so destructive. So I would say, if you want a healthy relationship, have a look at your values and make sure that they are healthy. And is the person you're attaching to ticking all of the boxes, or are they just fulfilling an egotistical desire that you have at the moment?
All right, I've heard you say that you actually understand the logic of arranged marriages.
Yes.
And if I understood correctly,
Yeah.
because of this idea of shared values.
Yes.
What is the logic of an arranged marriage?
Essentially, what psychology has always found is, when two people come from similar backgrounds, they have a higher rate of them becoming successful in a relationship, only because they understand each other's norms and values in a way that nobody else can. If I understand that, let's say, for example, silent treatment was given in my house, I know to give you you're giving me silent treatment, we'll get back to normal. I understand that pathology in you. Or if I understand that, it can even be in a toxic way. If I understand sometimes some people swear at each other, then you get back together. We understand each other's norms and values. What arranged marriages do is, two parents will choose parents who are similar to them. So what will happen is, they have children who have been raised relatively similar. So those two people, when they get together, tend tend to have shared norms and values. So there's an element of unspoken understanding in the real world, just meeting each other randomly, especially now that we have dating apps and I can meet a man in Colombia and a Colombian man can meet a woman in Ghana. It's so different. So we're only going to end up attaching on egotistical desires, either because we like the way each other's looks, or we might get on with the same music, or might have the same taste in movies. But our actual upbringings are very difficult and different, and norms and values are very different. So that's why I think I can understand the logic behind arranged marriages more now than ever before.
Now, would you like your parents to arrange your marriage?
I always rebelled against it, but now I wish I listened.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes I'm now like, oh, maybe I should have listened. Only because there was an element of you just assume you're losing your autonomy. But what you're actually doing is you're trusting the process a little bit more. So I think I could have probably made it work more when I was younger, but at the time, because I felt so controlled in other areas of my life, this is the one area where they gave me some leeway. So I was like, you're not controlling that part. But had they been more lenient in other areas, I probably would have allowed them more insight into the partner I choose.
That's interesting. Are you married?
No.
So it's not too late.
It's not too late, but I am committed.
Oh, so you're in a relationship. Got it.
Yeah.
Now, how does he feel about you saying, maybe I should have let
I think the thing is, because I'm so traditional at heart, he understands where this comes from. Obviously, we're lucky that we have the same norms and values, which is where we got lucky. But because I have a very traditional mindset, and I don't know how or why. I grew up in London. I grew up in an entirely English school. I didn't have any Muslim or Pakistani friends, but for some reason I kind of found myself orientated towards a traditional value system, and I really don't know where it came from, but I just internalized those traditional values from a really young age, and so now I can always see things from the lens of tradition rather than in the lens of modernism, and I don't know why.
It's interesting. Were you traditional, as I assume the traditional values came from your family?
And religion. Do you know what it was? I naturally got attached to God from quite a young age. I don't know what it was. I started to feel like I couldn't trust people, so I started putting trust in God. And I think what happens then through life, I ended up looking at life through the lens of religion. And if it was acceptable by religion, then I probably would question it less. But if it was going against religion, I'd start questioning what's going on in society, and that led me to kind of forming my own opinion. So I'd question things more, particularly because everything I was around was against what I was being told by God. So I'd end up questioning it, and I found my own kind of rhythm with psychology.
Very interesting. Okay, so I want to understand, as you're taking on these traditional values, you're somebody who's very aware of the soup of life that you're in. Yeah. For people that know your content, they've seen you talk a lot about you are of the culture. Like, you're from Dubai, not from Dubai, but you live in Dubai now. When you talk about modern dating, you're talking about it from that perspective. This is what it's like. This is what I see you coach in this area. So you definitely get the space. I would assume that's something you've always been good at. So I'm curious, as you were growing up, you're weighing sort of, okay, religion is telling me this. I see people doing the opposite of that. Yeah. Were you looking at that and going, it doesn't seem to make them happy? Was that the thing that you checked it against?
I think so. I think what happened is I had a choice, especially now, like living abroad away from, the prying eyes of parents or anything. I had a choice. I could either live my life accordance to the rules of God, or I could be like, screw that, I'm doing the exact opposite of what I've been told by God, which is what a lot of religious people do when they finally find freedom. But when I looked at doing the opposite of what God prescribed, I found that it looked like mayhem. So, for example, I'm not allowed to drink. The opposite would be to get really drunk. But when I would see people doing that, it didn't look like something I would enjoy. Or I'm not allowed to have sex and all this stuff and casuals. When I looked at people who were enjoying in that, I saw the negative consequences of children, and then having the abortion debate and all these things. And I just thought doing the opposite doesn't look healthy psychologically. So I ended up going more towards a tradition while staying very alert and aware of what was going on in the real world, because all my friends do indulge and I'm not judgmental. So I ended up being really good friends with people who do, but I just realized it wasn't good for me personally.
Ooh. Do you really think it's just you personally, or do you not think it's pretty universal?
I would say it's universal, but I don't want to, put my views on there. But for me, I just feel my views on there. But for me, I just feel no rule. And I know it's like a lot of people find my religion misogynistic and they find it really negative, but there was no rule. When I look at the opposite, did I think the opposite is better? For example, we might have, as women, have to cover. I know I don't, but we're supposed to cover. When I look at what the opposite looks like, the opposite might be like pornography, women, OnlyFans. That the opposite doesn't look healthy to me. I'm sure there's a good middle ground, but when we live in quite a polarizing kind of universe, I know which side I'd rather be on. And so that's what made me always, every time I see the opposite, and because I live in a world now, because of technology, I can literally see what the opposite of religion looks like. It looks like OnlyFans, it looks like, like lots of sexual promiscuity, it looks like getting drunk a lot. I just thought the opposite doesn't make sense to me. So it means that the restrictions actually might be healthy for me personally.
It's interesting. So
do you drink alcohol?
I do occasionally, but not very often.
How come?
It makes me feel like I'm suppressing the urge to dance on a table, which is wonderful, and I love that feeling. The reason I don't do it is entirely because it's brutal on the body.
Right.
And so I don't like the way it makes me feel the next day, and I worry that it shortens my lifespan.
Right.
But if it didn't make me feel bad, I would have no problem doing it on the weekends and having fun. I'm a hyper-disciplined, goal-oriented person, so I'd never do it during the week. That's a whole different thing.
Right.
So I want to go back to religion. So I grow increasingly fascinated by the role of religion, why it lasted as long as it did, why it seemed to dip for a while and seems to be coming back.
Yeah.
My hypothesis goes like this. I think it's something like humans are a storytelling species. That's what we do. We are all about simplifying the world, turning it into a meme that can be passed on, and religion is the ultimate meme spreader.
Right.
And so when something works, and you're Islamic?
Yeah.
Okay. So to use a law that you guys put in place, don't eat pork.
Yeah.
Now, my gut instinct is that the reason that became true is because of, is it trichinosis? I think is the thing if you undercook pork.
Yeah.
And so you don't necessarily, you don't have the scientific data to back up, but you know something's wrong.
Yeah.
And so you're like, that's not a great idea.
Yeah.
And in trying to explain it to people, it ends up becoming a part of oral tradition at first, of course, and then ultimately gets written down, and that becomes the word of God.
Yeah.
And so it is a very useful tactic, whether on purpose or on accident. I don't know, how this ends up forming, but it is a very useful thing to put it in the mouth of God and say, God says don't do this thing.
To legitimize it.
Yeah, exactly. So don't have kids out of wedlock. Why? Because they are less likely to survive, right? So I think religion ultimately is basically the ultimate way to get a very good idea to cross over time. And that if one were to write the Bible today, it would say things like, don't do an OnlyFans account, make sure that you have values as you go into your marriage, like whatever the things are that are going to lead to human flourishing in that moment.
Yeah.
And the reason that these ideas stay and cross through so much time is because they're so useful.
Right.
And that's where this gets really intriguing to me for people now. So going back to shared narratives.
Yeah.
Religion gave people shared narratives.
Yes.
They made it easier to make the right choices because you didn't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
So
it's all prescribed for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think a lot about culture stacks, meaning I don't have to rediscover electricity. I'm born into a world that has electricity. I don't have to rediscover the printing press or the wheel. And as we invent things like the printing press and the internet, now all of a sudden ideas can travel fast.
Right.
My growing concern is that there's too much velocity of information now. We'll set that aside. But religion was sort of that initial way to get these ideas to, for the smart ideas in culture to be easily transmissible to the next generation so that they could stand on the shoulder of giants.
Okay. So to make them concise and clear so people know what they're doing, don't have to think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just you follow
Go
the
it.
word of God
Yeah.
and things are going to be better. But now, if you had to abstract the values that people should be imbued, yeah, just you follow
Go
the
it.
word of God
Yeah.
and things are going to be better. But now, if you had to abstract the values that people should be imbuing as they come into a relationship, instead of necessarily saying because God said so, if you
Yeah.
had to distill it to the values that just make humans thrive,
Yeah.
what values are those?
It would be, is my behavior going to lead to a long-lasting, stable connection between the two of us? Now, if we always...
You think that's better. So
Yeah.
long-lasting relationships.
Long-lasting
Why?
relationship.
Why is that good?
Because I think what happens with long-lasting, firstly, they're more likely to create a shared meaning and purpose. Also, what happens is you end up knowing that you start to learn to reject things. If I know I'm going to stay with you forever, what will happen is I reject maybe, going to clubs every night because I know who I'm going to be home with. I reject dating multiple people at the same time. I reject sleeping around because I know where I'm ending up.
But why are those good things?
What I would say is the plethora of options reduces our satisfaction in anything anyway. So the idea, what monogamy does is it allows you to focus. It doesn't mean good or bad. But what I mean by this is if I'm only dating you and it's just you, at least in that 2-3 months where I'm just focusing on you, I either learn that you're the love of my life or I learn that you're terrible for me and I should never speak to you again. But if I dilute my experience with you by also talking to Tom, Dick and Harry, what will happen is I'm wasting energy not realizing that you might be really bad for me, but I haven't noticed because I'm also seeing Tom, Dick and Harry. Or you might be amazing for me. Again, I haven't noticed. So the reality is it creates internal chaos, whereas internal consistency will allow us to know what's good and bad for us and then remove ourselves or enjoying ourselves in what it is. But unfortunately, diluting the experience means that we end up being chaotic and we lose the ability to create an identity because we're almost spreading ourselves too thinly. So I think monogamy is a great way. It's a shortcut. It will either tell you we're going to work out or it'll tell you we're never going to work out. But at least I know through confining myself to that space.
Okay, so limit your options. Limiting your options is a necessary thing for happiness?
I would say not necessarily limiting, but rejecting alternatives in order to
I don't understand the difference.
Well, limiting your options would be like you don't even pay attention to what the alternative could be and you just stick to what you know. Rejecting the alternatives is knowing what you have, knowing what the alternative would look like and having the strength to say, I don't want it.
Okay, but how can you know the alternative? You talked about in the beginning, we just see too many people.
Yeah.
And that back in the day, it was easier because you didn't see as many people and you were pretty, but you were just pretty in your hometown and you were going to marry somebody in your hometown.
Yeah.
So if too many people is part of the problem set, it doesn't seem like awareness of all the options is necessary for thriving.
No, because it creates an illusion of options. What will happen is, just like if you were to open a Tinder account, luckily you probably never had to do any online dating, right?
Very fortunate.
You are incredibly fortunate, but what it looks like is you go in there and you're overwhelmed. So what would happen is the person would go on there and any single person can be easily replaced by the next swipe and the next swipe. So you end up applying minimal investment to each person. Everybody becomes disposable, and then by the end of it, you don't want to spend time with any of them because they've all just replaced each other. Whereas minimal kind of exposure means that I have the time and social battery and energy to invest in each person and then figure out who's right for me. But when I'm just swiping and there's millions of options, I don't actually realize what's good or bad for me.
So I still want to say, it sounds like you're saying that you do want to limit your options, but that doesn't feel right to you. Why doesn't saying limiting options?
Yeah, maybe I am saying it incorrectly because I think when people hear limiting the options, they think settling.
They do.
Yeah, and they...
But is that not part of what you're saying?
Well,
you're saying arranged marriage makes sense.
Yeah, I do think... Do you know what it is? What they see as settling, they see it as with a negative connotation. Yeah, they see settling...
But are they right?
No, because settling doesn't mean that you are compromising on what you truly want. It's just that you're recognizing what you truly want. So settling implies that you're not happy with what you've got. What I'm suggesting is you're so happy with what you got that you reject the alternatives. And you'll only become so happy with what you got through being able to reject the alternatives.
It's interesting. So one, I think arranged marriages are a terrible idea. But I don't know that this is true, but I've heard something about divorce rates being lower in arranged
they're the
marriages.
lowest. Yeah, they're the lowest.
All right, that's true?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay, this is one of those times, Axel, pull that shit up. I want to know if that's really true. If divorce rates in arranged marriages really are lower, then
they should be.
There is something. Okay, the divorce rate for arranged marriages is estimated at 4%, while the divorce rate where people choose their partners is estimated to be close to 40%.
Okay,
I don't know that I believe this.
Yeah, have a look at the divorce rates in somewhere like India or somewhere where like the arranged marriages are prominent, but I promise you it's lower. But that could also, I want to preface that could also be because there's a stigma associated to divorce in cultures which practice arranged marriages.
Yes.
So it could be mitigated by that. But on the whole, I would like to think that from what I remember, arranged marriages have the lowest levels of divorce. Because people who engage in arranged marriages don't do it with the purpose of assuming that love is the glue that keeps you together forever.
Okay, so love isn't the glue that keeps us together?
Whereas when you go into a marriage...
What is the glue?
Well, I would say it's different for most people, but I would imagine that most people, what I would imagine is the glue is a duty to one another's well-being and the function of the marriage. I would imagine that the glue that keeps a relationship together is, even though we might have a rough year, a rough 5 years, a rough 10 years even, but your well-being matters to me and my well-being matters to you. And so therefore, making sure that we engage in a lifelong purpose of maintaining that and the duty that we created towards one another when we made our vows is more important than how we're feeling right now. It's a bit like if you signed a 10-year contract with a basketball team. If you're a basketball player, you might hate it some months, you might love it some seasons, whatever it is, but you're committed to the purpose and the duty that the contract suggested.
This is very interesting. Okay, so a duty to one another's well-being.
Why do you disagree with arranged marriage? Sorry to interrupt you, but
Not at all.
Why do you disagree with arranged marriages?
Okay, so you and I share a lot of values. If we were to lay out what values we think people need to have in order to have a successful marriage, I actually will be very surprised if they are at all different.
Yeah.
I rebel against authority so violently, you can't imagine. One of my primary values is autonomy. So I cannot live in a world where somebody gets to tell me who to love. I need to be free to be a moron. And it is for me, it is authoritarian to oppose something like that top down.
Okay, did you rebel against your parents' authority when you were younger? What was it about the way that they relayed orders to you that you didn't like?
They wanted me to do something I didn't want to do. My parents were incredibly loving. I have no beef. If you watched me, you would have thought I was a brat. You wouldn't have thought, oh, his parents are really mean or anything. Yep, I just don't do well with that. Which we could easily derail into why I think from an evolutionary standpoint, the tribe needs some people like me. They need some people like you, my wife. Like, they need all of it. I just had a conversation yesterday with Gad Sad, and he was saying, oh, maybe I shouldn't be this way. And I was like, actually, I think it's good that the tribe has your style of communication, which can be very aggressive, very satirical, but it's good that we have that perspective. So I don't think as a tribe we want uniformity. We want, the only way to truly narrow in on what is true is to get a bunch of different perspectives, make sure everybody can speak up. So I think it's probably good that the tribe has people like me that just cannot deal with authority. But that's why I don't like arranged marriages. It doesn't necessarily mean that arranged marriages won't yield more human flourishing. And so if I had time to really review the data, I may walk away going, hey guys, look, I wouldn't want to do it, but the data's in, and arranged marriages just work better.
Yeah, usually from a psychological perspective, people who reject authority, growing up, they didn't trust their parents' authority either because they didn't have the same values or because they didn't like the method in which they relayed it. So they end up losing trust for their parents' authority, and then that just extends through life. Whereas people who really trust and respect their parents' authority end up accepting authority later on in life.
Do you think we're blank slates?
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of it is blank slates, but I do think we have a
Give
natural
me a
temperament.
rough percentage.
I would say that we are 30% genetics and 70% environment.
Interesting.
What
Okay.
would you say?
50-50 is what
Yeah.
science ballparks
Science says,
at.
yeah, but I would say that your environment is pretty much everything. I personally think that my personality...
Wait. Did you just say your environment is pretty much everything?
Well, it's more so than your temperament, because I believe that personally the traits I hold, if I wasn't a woman and if I wasn't raised in the right environment, if I didn't have the parents I did, I would very much be a criminal personality. It's very criminal.
Really?
I'm fearless.
I'm shocked by that.
Yeah, I'm absolutely fearless. I have no
But
fear.
why would that lead you to criminality?
Because if I need to say, now if I was a man with that mentality and if I was somebody who was struggling for money with that personality, there's no way I'd still be on the streets. I'd be in prison, or at least rehab.
That's really fascinating. I'm shocked
Yeah.
by that. Okay, so going back to arranged
Yeah.
marriage,
Yeah.
the value set.
Yeah.
Okay, so we understand why I don't like arranged marriage,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, human flourishing is my North Star,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think there's anything in life that will give you more of the things that I would ballpark to human flourishing than a healthy, romantic partnership, which that word's very important to me for people dealing with the modern dating world. I will just say, do not see your significant other as an adversary. You need to be looking for a partner.
Yeah.
So life has taught me, there's a
Yeah.
reason I've been married for 21 years.
Yeah.
Life has taught me that it's worth the investment. But I actually find, so I think you're picking up on my reaction as if I don't agree with
No,
you.
I know, because
But-
I've seen you in interviews before. You challenge the people that you still kind of fundamentally agree with. You just want to make sure you understood them correctly.
Correct.
Yeah.
So duty also, I think people are going to have a hard time with some of the words you're
Yeah.
using. But what I like about you is you're unafraid to take your stance. So duty to one another's well-being. And I will say, when I got married, I tattooed 4 words on my arm as a reminder to me what this was all about, to make it work well.
Yeah.
And they were love, passion, commitment, and respect. And commitment was, I was very aware that men are valued for their ability to acquire resources and women are valued for their beauty. And so I was like, ooh, as my value goes up in a traditional sense, my wife's will go down in a
Right.
traditional sense. And there's a whole nother thing to life, though, which is sharing a life with somebody.
Right.
Now, in that very small set of words hides a lot. But I wanted Lisa to know, you never have to worry about me trading you in for an upgraded model.
Right.
The reason you don't have to worry about me trading you in for an upgraded model is not because I think you're the most beautiful woman in the world. I don't think you're the most beautiful woman in the world today. I'm not going to think you're the most beautiful woman in the world when you're 90. So I want you to understand I'm committed to you
Yeah.
because you make my life better. And I want to share this life with you.
Yeah.
And I'm not the best looking guy in the world, and I'm not going to be the richest guy in the world. I
Yeah.
certainly wasn't the richest guy when we met, I will tell you that. So that was important to me,
Yeah.
that we both focus on that idea, that we have a duty to one another's well-being.
Yeah.
And like, as somebody that hates authority,
Yeah.
I get why people don't want to submit to that. All right, forgive me.
Yeah.
But the other day I was talking to somebody about, I'm not religious,
Yeah.
but I want something to kneel before.
Right.
And
Well, that's a really interesting desire to have for somebody
Yes.
who's not religious.
I think every human being has that.
Yeah.
And I think that people don't acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And this is part of how people spiral out of control because we don't have shared narratives anymore, so
Yeah.
people don't understand how to navigate life. Thankfully, I read a book called The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. I
great.
highly recommend it.
Okay.
And so I realized, I do want to kneel before something.
Right.
And one of the things that I kneel before is my marriage. Not my
Aw.
wife, my marriage.
I love that.
And so that idea of each of us are going to kneel before this thing that is greater than either of us individually, and we are
Right.
going to protect it fiercely because we have a duty to one another's well-being. Why? Not because God told us to, but because that's what leads to human flourishing.
Yeah.
Which is why I think people say God tells you to.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think you're very true. Everybody has a need, and I think it's an evolved need. We all have a need to worship. Now, the problem is, because we've got no sense of God anymore, we've replaced the need to worship with either we're going to worship celebrities, or we're going to worship like influencers, or we're going to start worshiping ourselves and our own egotistical desires. So that's why I think it's always good to submit to something. Yeah, I personally submit to God, but it could also be your marriage, it could be also your parents for some people, it could be whatever it is. But having nothing to submit to means that you will definitely submit to your own desires.
Do you think people need to be very careful what they choose to submit to?
I think, yeah, they do. They definitely need to be very careful, because the thing is, whether we like it or not, we submit to the law, the systems of the law and the laws that we live in. Now, even in our short period of being alive, we've seen the laws change drastically. Now, the reason why I don't recommend submitting completely to a culture or society or the norms and values of a culture, I think, yeah, they do. They definitely need to be very careful, because the thing is, whether we like it or not, we submit to the law, the systems of the law and the laws that we live in. Now, even in our short period of being alive, we've seen the laws change drastically. Now, the reason why I don't recommend submitting completely to a culture or society or the norms and values of a culture is they're so changing so rapidly. So it leads to a fragile identity. Whereas what I like about religion is it creates a stable identity throughout the years. You'll never have to say, what does God think about this? You know. Whereas the laws and system, what could have been seen as offensive now would have been seen as normal practice 20 years ago. I just wonder what that does to people's identity, knowing that what they once believed in now is the worst thing on the planet, and then it might be cool again, and then it might be I don't know if it creates an internal dialogue that is steady. So that's why I recommend it.
Now, you migrated from submit to kneel.
Yeah.
Or sorry, from kneel to submit.
Yeah.
And so I see a pretty radical difference between those two.
What do you see as the difference?
So I submit to the law, but I don't kneel before the law. And if the law were to get deranged, which I have extreme fears about right now,
Yeah.
I would oppose it.
Right.
Whereas my marriage, there are ways that it could become dysfunctional to the point where I would exit my marriage. So I'm not somebody who thinks no matter what.
Yeah.
But when I say that I kneel before my marriage, it is entirely my responsibility to make sure that it does not devolve to that.
Okay.
So taking it back to the law, I kneel before the ideals that, before I make this statement, I was going to say I kneel before the ideals that this country was founded on.
Yeah.
I need to educate myself more deeply on that. I kneel before the ideals I think this country was founded upon. That's probably
I don't know enough, I'm afraid, but I'm sure there's something offensive in the...
is there?
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know enough, yeah.
But anyway, I draw a distinction between the law and the ideals that should be aimed at human thriving.
I get what you mean by the difference between kneeling and submitting. One sounds more voluntary, the other one sounds like it is what it is, like it's more involuntary. So I understand what you probably mean, but when you say kneeling and submitting, they're not synonymous. Yeah, I get what you mean.
Okay, so going back to the values that make a relationship work. So the four things that I think originally I was going to get like 9 tattooed. And the tattoo artist was like, the writing will be too small.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting exercise to force me to boil it down to those 4.
Yeah.
If you had to give people 3 to 5 things, values, like super succinct, that are going to allow them to have that longevity, what would those be?
I would say the first is honesty, even if it hurts. And the reason why I think honesty is such an important one is even when it's something like, if my partner says, Sadia, you've gained weight. Yeah, as much as I might not like that, or, your makeup doesn't look nice, as much as I don't like that, what it does is it redirects me into a way that will keep us connected. One of the reasons why so many people end up having affairs is they have this kind of unmet need, but a fear of telling the truth to their partner because their partner is so fragile and easily offended. So there might be a man that feels like his wife has let go and doesn't want to tell her, but then will outsource sexual desire elsewhere. It might be a woman that feels like her man is not, aggressive enough physically when they're making love and whatever, so she ends up never saying it to him and then outsourcing it elsewhere. So I would say honesty is important, but honesty without brutality. What happens is people who suppress it is that they don't say the truth, but when they get into a fight, they say the truth but with venom. They say, this is why you're so shit, and this is why. They say it negatively. So you want honesty without brutality, honesty with whilst you're on a good terms rather than just during a fight. So I'd say honesty is a really important one about. Another thing is not doing anything behind your partner's back that you wouldn't do in front of their face. And what I mean by that is, even if that means you
Can we call that integrity?
Yeah, I would say so, integrity. Because even if, let's say, for example, he's texting a girl or I'm texting a boy, if that's something I would do in front of him, say, I'm just messaging this person, or I'm just talking to this person, there's nothing wrong with that. But where you would do it the same behind their back as you would intimacy. If I'm honest, what I like in terms of physical intimacy, we create that. If I'm honest about what makes me less attractive to you, we create attraction. So I just say that honesty is a really important one. Would you add anything else to that one?
So we've got honesty, integrity. Yeah, so mine are the four that I have tattooed on myself.
What does respect look like to you? Because I know that's something that men always talk a lot about. But in literal terms, what would respect look like from a man's perspective?
So respect is one of the reasons I chose that is a lot of things go into that. So for me, being honest with somebody is how you show them respect.
Right.
If I'm lying to you, I am not respecting you. If I lack integrity, I'm not respecting you.
Yeah.
The easiest way for me to explain respect, though, would be my wife went from a traditional housewife, and I loved it because she took care of everything. It was amazing. In fact, at some point we should talk about what it was like for the two of us to research and interview you on the same day, because it was had us asking each other questions.
Yeah, she mentioned something.
Yeah, which was really, actually really fun. I really wish more people would do things like that. They should watch your episodes and then talk to each other. So that is when you have the respect of, I know who my wife wants to become, because she wanted to go from housewife to entrepreneur.
Right.
And that was deeply uncomfortable for me.
Right.
And I had to mourn the loss of my traditional wife. But I needed to respect that she wanted to become something else. And so the thing that occurred to me as we were going through this was, I believe, going back, you really put great words around it, that I have a duty to my wife's well-being.
Yeah.
And so the words that kept occurring to me were, I want you to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
And so I would never want to stop you from becoming who you want to be.
Right.
And so she was very graceful in letting me mourn that I was losing something.
Yeah.
And then I showed her the respect to help her, not only give her the space, but to help her become the person that she wants to become, and not just be a cheerleader, but literally be a savage in the fight for what she wants. So there's a lot that goes into that.
What did you miss about her going from traditional housewife to successful entrepreneur?
Man, this is a big
because she mentioned today
rabbit hole.
that she was watching one of my videos, and I talk a lot about how men, I know it sounds so ridiculous, but they just love a meal from their wife. It doesn't even have to be home cooked, just her plating it or her knowing what he likes.
Do you get why that matters to guys?
I don't know if that's an evolutionary thing, if it's something that's in them, but I also think that because they're not so verbal, acts of service means a lot to them, because they don't know how to express their needs sometimes. So somebody understanding their needs and predicting them before they have to say it.
But that's why.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
Now this is one where I'm not confident enough that this is universal.
Please explain to me.
Having somebody understand me so well that they can anticipate my needs. Yeah. And that I'm so important to them that they want to make that need go away before I have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But there's a reason for that. Now, there's a lot of tension around what I'm about to say between my wife and I.
Yeah.
This is so fascinating to me, because this is, I think, my wife's fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of a man.
Right.
And I am a savage for my wife.
Yeah.
Everything I do for my wife.
Yeah.
I work as hard as I work for my wife.
Yeah.
Now, here's the problem. My wife wishes I wouldn't work that hard.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? So now my wife is crying out for me, please work less. You say you do this for me,
Yeah.
but I need you to work less. And what I'm saying to her is, I need to be appreciated for how hard I'm working, which is what you show me when you recognize my needs and make them go away. I then feel like being a savage for you is being rewarded. It's being acknowledged. It's being appreciated. Appreciation is the right word.
Yeah.
And ladies, I'm telling you right now, if you appreciate your man and make him feel powerful, that's it. It's a wrap.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Like,
which is why I always say that successful men have it the hardest. I'm not talking about you. I think, praise be to God, you have a very beautiful marriage. But generally speaking, successful men, I find, have it the hardest time when it comes to being married. And it's because they create a life that it almost enables a lazy woman. Yeah, I mean, that hasn't happened for you. She's an absolute, legend in her field. But the majority of very successful CEOs enables all the other features of a good connection to thrive. If I'm honest with you about what I like in terms of emotional intimacy, we create emotional intimacy. If I'm honest what I like in terms of physical intimacy, we create that. If I'm honest about what makes me less attractive to you, we create attraction. So I just say that honesty is a really important one. Would you add anything else to that one?
so we've got honesty, integrity. Yeah, so mine are the four that I have tattooed on myself.
Respect. What does respect look like to you? Because I know that's something that men always talk a lot about. But in literal terms, what would respect look like from a man's perspective?
So respect is one of the reasons I chose that is a lot of things go into that. So for me, being honest with somebody is how you show them respect.
Right.
If I'm lying to you, I am not respecting you. If I lack integrity, I'm not respecting you.
Yeah.
The easiest way for me to explain respect, though, would be my wife went from a traditional housewife, and I loved it because she took care of everything. It was amazing. In fact, at some point we should talk about what it was like for the two of us to research and interview you on the same day, because it was
So
like had us asking each other questions.
Yeah, you mentioned something.
Yeah, which is really actually really fun. I really wish more people would do things like that. They should watch your episodes and then talk to each other. So that is when you have the respect of I know who my wife wants to become, because she wanted to go from housewife to entrepreneur.
Right.
And that was deeply uncomfortable for me.
Right.
And I had to mourn the loss of my traditional wife. But I needed to respect that she wanted to become something else. And so the thing that occurred to me as we were going through this was, I believe, I mean, going back, you really put great words around it, that I have a duty to my wife's well-being.
Yeah.
And so the words that kept occurring to me were, I want you to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
And so I would never want to stop you from becoming who you want to be.
Right.
And so she was very graceful in letting me mourn that I was losing something.
Yeah.
And then I showed her the respect to help her, not only give her the space, but to help her become the person that she wants to become, and not just be a cheerleader, but literally be a savage in the fight for what she wants. So there's a lot that goes into that.
What did you miss about her going from traditional housewife to successful entrepreneur?
Man, this is a big
Because she mentioned
rabbit hole.
today that she was watching one of my videos, and I talk a lot about how men, I know it sounds so ridiculous, but they just love a meal from their wife. It doesn't even have to be home cooked, just her plating it or her knowing what he likes.
Do you get why that matters to guys?
I don't know if that's an evolutionary thing, if it's something that's in them, but I also think that because they're not so verbal, acts of service means a lot to them, because they don't know how to express their needs sometimes. So somebody understanding their needs and predicting them before they have to say it.
But that's why.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
Now, this is one where I'm not confident enough that this is universal.
Please explain to me.
Having somebody understand me so well that they can anticipate my needs.
Yeah.
And that I'm so important to them that they want to make that need go away before I have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But there's a reason for that. Now, there's a lot of tension around what I'm about to say between my wife and I.
Yeah.
This is so fascinating to me because this is, I think, my wife's fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of a man.
Right.
And I am a savage for my wife.
Yeah.
Everything I do for my wife.
Yeah.
I work as hard as I work for my wife.
Yeah.
Now, here's the problem. My wife wishes I wouldn't work that hard.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? So now my wife is crying out for me, please work less. You say you do this for me,
Yeah.
but I need you to work less. And what I'm saying to her is, I need to be appreciated for how hard I'm working, which is what you show me when you recognize my needs and make them go away. I then feel like being a savage for you is being rewarded. It's being acknowledged. It's being appreciated. Appreciation is the right word.
Yeah.
And ladies, I'm telling you right now, if you appreciate your man and make him feel powerful, that's it. It's a wrap.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Like,
Which is why I always say that successful men have it the hardest. I'm not talking about you. I think, praise be to God, you have a very beautiful marriage. But generally speaking, successful men, I find, have it the hardest time when it comes to being married. And it's because they create a life that it almost enables.
trying to go on now is really defining like what the through line of the show is for people so they can understand. For me, it's always been self-evidently empowerment, but the number of things that will go through. So what we end up doing is our audience is around topics and they're totally separate.
Yeah.
And so if I do an episode on finance, I can predict how it's going to do. If I do an episode on relationships, I can predict how it's going to do. And it's not the same people.
Right.
And so what I really want people to understand is this is about empowering you to live life well.
Yeah.
And there is one through line through every person that I bring on the show. But no, the people that would come to me for relationships are very different than the people that would come to me for finance, et cetera, et cetera. So I honestly don't know how they feel about marriage.
How did you balance a healthy relationship while being so unbelievably successful? Because usually one gives whilst the other one kind of suffers. But how did you manage that? I haven't seen that very often, so I'm very impressed by it.
So one, my number one priority is my marriage. And so Lisa and I talk about that. But as I was just saying, she wishes I worked less. She would gladly trade in some percentage of our success for that.
Yeah.
And so we've really had to communicate endlessly. And so communication is something we're extraordinarily good at. And then we know what each other's good at. And she will feel disconnected before me. And so I have said, okay, cool, you're empowered. If you feel disconnected, I will listen to you.
Right.
And so we won't wait for me to feel disconnected because that will take way too long and you'll really be upset by that point. So speak up. When you say something, I will immediately adjust my behavior. So, for instance, Quest ended up coming into existence because I was so unhappy at the company we were running before that. And she said, this is now damaging our marriage. You need to do something.
Right.
And so that something was to quit, long story. That ends up becoming Quest and ends up being amazing. But that was really born out of my wife saying, okay, this is damaging the marriage. And me saying, hey, I said if you ever said it, that I would make immediate change. So that's really important. Like you have to know.
Where did you learn that skill?
At 14, I started having a recurring nightmare that I was in a loveless marriage.
Really?
At 14. I'd never been in a relationship. Lisa's the only person I have ever said I love you to in a romantic way.
Stop, really?
Yes. So now at 18, my dad leaves and says he's been unhappy for 10 years.
Right, makes sense.
So now you can track it back.
Yeah.
Oh shit, he's been unhappy since I was 8.
Yeah.
And so there was something that I was picking up on that I never could have explained to you.
Right.
I was young, first of all.
Yeah.
But I'm recurring.
Amazing that your energies of children, they pick up on their parents' happiness.
And that it translates into, like, I had no conscious awareness of it whatsoever. So anyway, one, I'm deeply self-aware. I'm empathetic. And so I have this recurring nightmare. So I make a promise to myself. I'm okay never getting married. I'm not okay being with somebody that I actually don't like that much. And so I'm a very specific flavor. And so I learned very quickly that I would have to pretend to be something I wasn't around people. And so there's no mistake that Lisa happened not long after I said, I'm going to start aggressively being myself. And if people don't like it, I don't give a shit.
Right.
And so, but coupled with, I won't be in a loveless marriage. It takes work. And I read Cosmopolitan a lot. So here, my mom told me the best piece of advice I ever got about women, because this shook my entire worldview. My entire worldview fell apart. This was so foreign to me. She said, almost as a throwaway comment, you know, for women to have an orgasm, they have to trust you. And I was like, what? I just need a location. Like, that was so trust. Like, what could that possibly have to do with an orgasm? And so that sent me on a very detailed quest to figure out, okay, women think differently than I do.
But, you know, one thing I would say is I know women, I completely agree with your mum's statement, but we're almost taught that men can disconnect emotionally from sex. I really disagree with that, because if you get a man to have sex with a woman who looks like she's not enjoying it and looks like she's in pain or looks like she'd rather not be there, his fulfillment is minimal. There's nothing there. Whereas when he would rather take a less attractive woman who looks like she's having the time of her life and looks like she adores him over an attractive woman who looks like she can't stand him. So there is something psychological in it for men as well. If it was just a human need and every hole is a goal, they wouldn't really become impotent because their wife has expressed such disgust when they've tried to be sexually active with her, and they've literally lost their ability to erect. So I do think it's equally psychological. I just think men don't realize it's psychological because they're usually so erect and ready to roll. But I do think it's signals, it's psychological signals that determines their sexual pleasure.
That is
Would you
more
agree?
true than you know.
Is that true? Because it's just what I keep
But
noticing.
I will say that you're interpreting that through the mind of a woman.
Yes.
And so I will say
Go
that
ahead.
there, for a guy, neutral to positive, fantastic. Now, if the person is really into you, that's going to be way more fun. Way more fun.
What if
And
she's
look,
really not into you?
I couldn't do it. No
I
way.
don't. Yeah.
There's no universal.
It would
witch.
activate the predatory fear in a man. Like, you never want to be feeling like a rapist. So I would imagine if she's not into
that,
unfortunately,
much to my dismay, will not be universal.
Not universal, no.
That is horrifying to me.
Yeah.
But
do you think that's pornography related, or do you think that predates pornography?
Yeah. Oh God.
Yeah.
So here we're now in territory. I have not looked at the literature.
the
I don't know what the real answer is.
Yeah.
But when you think about what was war historically, it was you had excess men in the population who did not have access to women. There was a massive Gini coefficient, meaning there was a huge discrepancy between the men that had and the men that did not have. So there's a hypothesis that Vikings were a society in which one man would monopolize many women. So you had a lot of guys that were like, well, how do I get a woman? You go to war. And there was some recent thing where, like, a tribe that's still alive, where they were like, when asked, why do you go to war? They said, oh, for women.
Okay.
And they were like, what other reason would you ever go to? Like, they were so
They couldn't
confused.
understand it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so that's horrifying.
Yeah, no,
I'm very
but there's,
sad that
but
that's
yeah,
a true thing.
There's even like evidence of a particular fly that holds down the wings of the female fly, inseminates and runs away. Like, rape it's in the animal kingdom as well. Doesn't justify it, but it does exist. But I just wonder, like, is the advent of porn reducing the desire to rape because you're kind of getting access to it, or does it kind of glorify rape? I don't know. I don't watch, and so I don't know. But I'm wondering from a man's perspective, is it cathartic? Can you kind of get rid of that?
That's not my kink, so that one I wouldn't be able to speak to.
Yeah.
But my gut instinct is porn does sedate.
Right.
And that whatever, it's not like it will keep ratcheting up until you go out and do something. I have a feeling, although I've heard you talk about serial killers being addicted to porn, I have a feeling that that's correlation and absolutely not causation. You have somebody who is just, they are broken from an empathy perspective. And so their response to porn would be
very different.
Complete objectification. This person is an inanimate object, and that's why it plays out in their sadistic sex. Where Ted Bundy, who I have read about because he unfortunately lived where I grew up.
No way.
So I learned quite a bit about him, and so that feels more like a thing in their brain is broken.
I do agree in that sense, because in order to form an addiction to pornography, there has to be a level of emptiness and a brokenness in their soul to lead to that escapism, and then it might go on to other poor behaviors. So I don't think it's necessarily a cause. I think it's a pit stop on the destiny of becoming something evil, unfortunately.
I don't know that becoming evil, yes, probably. There probably is a path. But this is where I will say, if we're 50% hardwired
Yeah.
and 50% the environment, that, man, I don't think you become Hitler or Ted Bundy unless the part of the 50% that's hardwired is broken.
Yeah, there must be something prenatal in there.
Yeah, because I, like, as somebody who's wired for empathy, like, I just can't fathom.
Yeah.
I can't fathom.
Do you think
it's just-
empathy is the ingredient that's allowed you to be so monogamous and not be
Ooh,
tempted?
okay, so this I've thought a lot about. No, I don't think that's the thing. Because if you said to me, hey, she'll never find out.
Yeah.
Never, ever.
No pain.
Yeah, no way. She is never going to know. Like,
Yeah.
this is guaranteed by God, not going to happen.
And that's
She's never
very
going to find out.
doable in this day and age.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you cheat? Hell no. Okay, then why not?
Yeah.
I think there's two reasons. One, my brain literally, if you were to do a biopsy of my brain, I have a feeling you would find that I have massive amounts of receptors for vasopressin and oxytocin. The sensing I get with my wife is fucking crazy. And so I feel bad because
Yeah.
that means I just have a leg up. Like,
Yeah.
part of why I've been
Me
able
too.
to...
I agree. I don't feel like it's any virtue in me. I think it's something just in me that makes it impossible for me to be simultaneously with two people. I don't think it's because I'm virtuous or moralistic. I think I just can't I can't get pleasure from two people simultaneously.
Well, now we're asking a different question. Because if my wife was like, no, be so hot, have sex with someone. Okay, word. So,
Okay, then
that
there
is very different. But I would
Yeah.
never want to be in a relationship
Right.
with two people.
Right, okay.
But men really do have a pull for novel sexual
Yeah.
encounters. And especially a novel sexual encounter with a woman who finds me attractive, that would be rad.
Right,
Like,
okay.
super rad.
Yeah.
Now, the only reason I don't do that is because my marriage is my highest priority, because that gives me way more than
Yeah.
a bunch of novel sexual experiences would give me. But when I decided to propose to Lisa, I literally made a pros and cons list. And one of the cons was, I'll never sleep with another woman again. And am I okay with that? That was not an easy, like, yeah, I'm okay with that. I was
Yeah.
like, ooh.
And you were super young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
the height
was
of your testosterone.
that was a sacrifice. And that's part of why our marriage has lasted, because I've thought a lot about what will make this marriage worth that kind of sacrifice.
So can I ask, like, a lot of women come to me and I'm always a little bit done, and I've asked my partner this as well and he doesn't really give me much, but some women will come to me and say to me, like, my husband just doesn't crave me anymore. He just doesn't want to sleep with me. I think it's me. Like, I know all I ever see on movies and stuff is how the man always wants to have sex, but really I'm the one that's always initiating and I'm the one that has to do it. And I don't know what it is, why my husband just won't initiate or won't want to be with me sexually. What do you think? I always say that maybe you're not nurturing other needs of his outside of the sexual relationship. So I always wonder, I ask, have you cooked for him recently? That's their foreplay. Have you cooked for him? Have you made sure that his, maybe his clothes are ready or whatever it is? Have you thought about his life before he has to think about it outside of the bedroom? That's usually my answer, but I could be wrong. So I was just wondering what you...
You could also be right.
I could be.
Like, that to me is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Also, feeling emotionally connected.
Yeah.
And I really, really believe that men can be, of course, we're complicated and all of that. And the wonderment of being in a long-lasting marriage is to go way beyond the two things I'm about to say.
Yeah.
But honestly, if you don't get these two things right, you are dust.
Right.
You have to appreciate him and all the things that he does, like, for real,
Yeah.
and you need to exude that.
Yeah.
If you exude appreciation, you work so hard, thank you for everything you do, you make all these sacrifices, you do it for the
Yeah.
family. Because I can pretty much guarantee you that at least in the beginning, he did that. And
Yeah.
the only reason he may no longer work with that in his mind is because you made him feel unappreciated.
Yeah.
And so if you appreciate him for that, huge. Make him feel powerful.
Right.
Make him feel powerful.
And what about if
this
he's
is-
not powerful? What if he...
Oh, God. Okay,
What
so
about
now
if
one
he's-
of my questions I wrote down, how do you tell your wife that she's gotten fat? So how do you tell your husband he's gotten weak?
Yeah, I guess here's the thing. What I think with both, whether you tell your wife she's gotten fat or when you tell your husband he's weak, instead of highlighting she's fat or he's weak, you highlight the time where they were the opposite. And you might say something like, "Do you remember the days where you used to play rugby? Oh, you just came across so powerful. You should get back into that. I loved seeing you like that." Or it could be a thing like, "Oh, babe, do you remember you in that red dress and stuff that day we met and stuff? Oh, you looked amazing. You looked amazing." It doesn't even have to be, "I want you back to that," because some women are so hypersensitive. But the problem is when they don't tell her, they allow her to become a woman they're no longer attracted to. And you have to tell your wife. And I know I get a lot of like backlash because I get told I'm fat shaming. But here's the thing. In my experience, when you gain a lot of weight, you start not liking yourself. And when you don't like yourself, you don't want to have sex with people. You don't want your husband to see you naked. You don't want him to touch you. So you end up just being okay with having very minimal physical contact. And then you drift apart. Whereas when you keep on top of yourself, you're looking forward to physically connecting. So I think it's really important to keep on top of your body for whilst you're married. I know there's kids. I know it's difficult. But life is difficult. You just have to eat less. If you can't work out, at least eat less.
Yeah, so eating less, yes, unfortunately, is a reality, but also what you eat is extraordinarily important.
Are you careful with what you eat?
I'm psychotic about this. So going back to part of the reason I want to do the show is to get people to understand you are having a biological experience. You must get sleep, sunlight, your diet needs to be right. Psychotic about this. So going back to part of the reason I want to do the show is to get people to understand you are having a biological experience. You must get sleep, sunlight, your diet needs to be right. And so, look, the reality is, men and women alike, you need to be attractive. You need to do things to be attractive to your spouse. You can never neglect that. You can't take it for granted. And by the way, so the thing I will add to what you said is, what I do is when my wife does something that I want more of, I lavish her with praise when she does it. And I learned very early.
What kind of things does she do that makes you
my God. That list is so long. But it could be she wears something she knows I love. And so I'm like, "Oh, man, thank you. I love those pants so much. Oh, my God. You know how much I love those." Right? So rather than when she wears a shirt I don't like, I'm not like, I hate that shirt. Though if she asked me if I liked it, I would tell her no. To your point about honesty. But so the list of things that my wife does for me that I want more of is very long. She's very thoughtful and just today she set out, I forgot to take chicken out for myself, and I had mentioned the other day that I wanted more avocado in my life, and so today there was a little sticky note with chicken thawing for me and an avocado that says, "I took this out for you." And so I would encourage that behavior, but that's easy stuff. The hard stuff is for women, physicality. And so with that, like, let's say that my wife's always been so on top of her physique, but one thing that I do is I'm like, let's say she just had her 44th birthday. And I'm like, hear me when I say, woman, you're so hot at 44. Most people don't get a woman this attractive at 24. And so I want to thank you. You didn't have to do that, and most people don't. And I know that it's mostly for yourself, but I really appreciate it. Like, it really means a lot to me, because I know one day we all turn to a bag of wrinkles. And so I've always reminded myself to appreciate your youth and beauty while I have it. And the fact that you've worked so hard to extend that, like, just objectively hot and attractive as long as you have, like, I'm super grateful.
And I even encourage women to be grateful when their partner's faithful. And because the thing is, a lot of women will say, "But that's a given, we're married, of course he's supposed to be faithful." But unfortunately, that's not an of course anymore. It's not.
Well, even if it is, it is not wise to take it for granted.
No, it's not wise.
It's never wise. In fact, now you have something that's easy that you can point to all the time and, like, cherish your partner for that and be like, wow, for instance, in fact, I'm going to say this to my wife later. Thank you. Literally, if I open my wife's phone and there was a file that said dick pics and it was 4 terabytes, I'd be like, wow, that's crazy. I wonder how 4 terabytes of dick pics got it. I wouldn't even think to be weird about it. Because she makes me feel
Yeah.
like I'm the center of her universe. And because I feel that in
Yeah.
my bones, it's not just a thing she says. Like I feel it in all the weird little small ways that a
Yeah.
person can feel it. I feel it. And so what I'm really thanking her for, thank you for making me feel safe
Yeah.
emotionally.
Yeah.
Like you make me feel emotionally safe. And that is an awesome feeling.
Yes, an amazing feeling. It allows you to then go on to do bigger and better things outside of the relationship. So many people are stunted because their partner doesn't make them feel safe. They can't progress at work. They can't fulfill their potential in the gym. They just can't fulfill their potential in other relationships because they're stunted. But once your partner makes you feel safe and secure, you can almost go out and conquer the world, as you guys literally have gone out and done. Isn't that amazing?
It's interesting. I read a quote once that said the people that take the biggest risks have the most stable home life.
Oh.
Now, things like that. So a lot of people have just heard me say that. But what I did when I heard that was I went home and I said, babe, I just heard this fact and it really made me think of us, that the people that have the most stable home lives take the biggest risks. Thank you, because this was when she was still a housewife. Thank you for doing what you do and allowing me to go take these big risks. I mean, at one point when Quest was a huge question mark and nobody knew if it was going to work, she let us put our house up as collateral. Like that's real shit. And so because both of us will routinely say in our darkest moments, as long as I have, for me it's her, as long as I have Lisa, everything else can go wrong and I'm good. And I really mean that. And because I feel that, it really does let me take these big chances.
Amazing.
But going back to what started all this, you need to take the time to go thank your spouse for those things, to not take those things for granted,
Absolutely.
to really reward them for behavior you now. If I may light the comments on fire with rage and anger, you have to then punish the things that you don't want.
What would that look like?
You tell me.
Okay,
Or tell me that I'm crazy.
Yeah, do you know what I would say? It's punishing the things that you don't like. Maybe I've never really perfected this. What ends up happening in my personal experience, when I punish what I don't like, I end up creating a new wound because I'm so tactless with it. I'm so like, and I can get mean and I can get brutal. And
Now, do you think it's the nature of punishment or is it the delivery?
It's my insecurity that is so projected into what I'm saying that it doesn't become a fruitful conversation. So what would be something I don't like turns into I'm going to put the relationship on the line now, and I'm going to wound you because I feel wounded in this moment. And it's something I've gotten better at over the years, but through the partner being so secure, they kind of walk your hand through it, but it's not something I have ever perfected. So I don't, if I could learn from you, how would you punish what you don't like without causing any additional wounds?
Yeah, so this is one that is you have to be extremely careful with. So rule number one, if you want to quote unquote punish, because I'm known for using language, it's meant to grab people's attention. It's not like I'm being cruel or mean, because if you do that, you are done. So number one, if you want to punish a behavior, you have to have made so many deposits, made them feel so loved and so secure that when you say, hey, when you do that thing, I don't like that.
Yeah.
And so let's just say that your partner likes to drink and you don't want them to drink anymore. This is not a problem. Lisa and I had, but let's just say. I would say, hey, it's your life. You have to do you. The last thing I want is to be your parent. I'm not your parent. I'm your spouse. But when you're doing that thing, I'm not going to be around you.
Right.
So by all means do it. But just know, once you've sobered up, come back, we'll hang out.
Yeah.
But when your spouse cherishes quality time, now all of a sudden it's like, when I go do this thing, they have set a clear boundary. They're not mean. They weren't cruel. They're not saying I'm a bad person for doing it. They're just saying I don't like it and I don't want to be around it. And so now it's my choice. I can go do it as much as I want. But they've been very clear.
Right.
Now, I am doing that because I know you want time with me.
Right.
And so it is a punishment.
Right.
But I'm not being a dick. I'm not being cruel. And I'm not making it up. I really don't like it.
So
I really don't want to be around
it. You set your boundary rather than like it's not literal, I'm punishing. Is it more just I'm setting a boundary?
It is punishment. It's just that boundaries are a way to create a penalty for that behavior that you don't want to see more of. in a way that doesn't create a wound.
Yeah, because the thing is, what you're describing is very effective boundaries. What boundaries basically are, it's not like, okay, you did this, bye, I'm never speaking to you. That's almost a self-sabotage, which is something I used to definitely indulge in. A boundary is simply, here's a behavior I don't like. If you're going to continue with it, I'm going to withdraw this particular behavior in response, but you're most welcome to be back in my life if you can abide by this particular rule.
Yep.
And so boundaries actually keep people in your world. They teach people how to love you effectively. So it's a semi-punishment, but more effectively, it's teaching your partner how to love you properly.
Yeah, it's interesting. People are going to hate the word punish.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to struggle in life because they don't understand that you really are drawing that line as a penalty.
But there's certain behaviors need a punishment.
Yes, and you have to be very careful. Remember,
So
I'm saying this within the
what
context.
would a punishment look like? Could Lisa do to you that would look like a punishment? What could she withdraw?
It's a really good question. So time would be one for me, for sure. Let's say that if I'm working too much and she's like, I'm not going to enable that anymore. So instead of making sure that your food is out or whatever, you're going to have to do that yourself.
Yeah.
And if you take time off, I'll cook for you.
Right.
Oh, word. Now it's like, okay, that's fair. Like I get.
Yeah.
So she's not rejecting me. She's not pushing me away, but she's saying, hey, this thing, I'll do one up. I'll make it even better. But I want to get the thing I want as well in exchange. Okay. Now, remember, we're going to communicate this to each other. So, in fact, the thing I told my wife is the only trick I'm ever going to play on you is that I will always tell you what I'm doing.
Right.
Now, I'm telling you what I'm doing because I know it will make it work better because you don't feel like a chess piece being moved around. You don't feel like you're being manipulated. Yeah. But by putting it out in the light, being completing, then I'm going to make time for you. Yeah. And then P.S., going back to the reward side, if she then stopped doing the thing I didn't want, or let's just use me. So she wants me to work less. Okay, cool. So let's say that she said something like either, hey, if you stop working early on a Wednesday night, I'm going to light some candles and it's going to be sexy time. Okay, interesting. Because now that might be something that I would make a change in my pattern for because I want that thing. So now it's like, oh, whoa.
Right.
Okay, now you've given me like a really cool incentive.
Yeah.
And what she's being honest. I want more of your time. I understand how important it is for you to accomplish. You've always said that the marriage is more important. Here's something that I think could really bond us. Yeah. That's how we talk. Yeah. So now...
And I'm so sorry to interrupt, but because I deal with people who suffer in relationships, I completely agree, and I'm in a very healthy state, so I understand that would work really well. But there are people that come to me and say, when I withdraw quality time from my partner and say, you know, I'm not going to spend time with you, or even if I withdraw physically, it doesn't shake them, it doesn't bother them. In those cases, I do say that if your withdrawal doesn't seem to affect them, then unfortunately the relationship has lost its bond. There's no bond left anymore. It only works when two people want when the person wants what you're depriving them of. Would you say that's
I would, but I'll also send people back to your earlier statement. We have a duty to one another's well-being. Yeah. And so the reason that this works is if my wife were to say, hey, I need more of your time, I'm not like, hey, you need to get on board. Like, I told you I was going to work this much. I'm like, whoa, okay. So you feel disconnected. That's why we've made you the holder of the key. So when you tell me you need more time, I'm going to make more time. Yeah. And so that's the part that I want to make sure that people are hearing.
It has to be the underlying thing. Because if you don't
100%.
Have a duty to their well-being, why are you with them?
Well, I could answer that question. You're with them because you're getting something advantageous out of the relationship. Yeah. But to your point, that can quickly become an egotistical, I think is the word you used. Yeah. That you're satisfying an ego drive rather than a human flourishing drive. Yeah. And so this is why, again, going back to values, you have to have a set of values that you live by. I live by my values, especially when they're inconvenient.
You know, I find your values so in line with religion. So it really, I'm sorry to bring it back to that, but sometimes I come across people who are more Muslim than I am or more religious than I am. And then I always admire people who have found those values independently. How did you get there?
Okay, so I often get made fun of for something, which is that in business, I was trying to explain what makes me a good entrepreneur. And I came up with this whole thing and I handcrafted it and I wrote it down and I read it to my team. And my team went, oh, that's the scientific method. And I was like, really? Now, you can make as much fun of me as you want for not knowing the scientific method. I didn't fucking study science.
Yeah.
Or you can recognize that when people triangulate on the same thing from different disciplines, that it probably means you've reached base truth. And the reason that a lot of my values probably sound like religion is because I've found values that work towards human flourishing.
Right.
And if I'm right that religion is just memes meant to lead you to human flourishing, then if we didn't converge on things, one of us is almost certainly wrong.
But you know, like becoming so successful as a man, and then being able to access, if you wanted to, you could just go live wherever you want, go any woman or anything like that. What made you be like that? None of that tempts me. I'm good, just succeeding, and not women just isn't part of, because the red pill space, you're bombarded with men that are kind of taught that the moment you become successful, you have to have a plethora of women, they have to look like this, they have to do that, and that's what makes you happy. What advice would you give to them? As a man who's made probably double than they'll ever make. This is not to put anybody down, but it's just it's like you're freakishly successful, both of you. So yeah, what advice would you give to people who are from that mind frame?
The only thing that matters in life is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself.
Yeah.
That's going to be determined by the evolutionary algorithms running in your brain and the values that you choose to adopt in your life. And I know how I want to feel. And so I've built a value system that I think will make me feel that way. And I update my values constantly when something isn't leading me to that path. And I believe in love.
Yeah.
And I believe in love. Whenever I use the word love to my wife, I always capitalize the L. And it is the thing before which I kneel.
Right.
So I don't just mean love like romance. I mean love like when you're fucking vomiting or you're afraid, like I might be dying right now. There's one person you want with you. And when that person is your best friend and the person who you trust and the person you know will run through a fucking wall for you, life does not have anything better to offer you.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm right about that, thinking of that person as your adversary, someone that you need to trick, is ludicrous.
Yeah.
Now, hear me, boys, when I say I used to show up on the first date with a custom written poem for that person and flowers. I was the caricature because I really believed that's what was going to work.
Right.
And then I asked this guy that I knew was getting laid left, right, and center. And he was gorgeous, by the way. He's like the model. He's the guy that, I forget what they call him, Chads. He was a Chad. He was broke, but he was a Chad. Back then.
Chads don't need to be rich. They just handsome.
Perfect. So he was a Chad.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is the key? And he said, you have to treat him, be an asshole. I think was his exact quote. And I was like, this is fucking stupid. I was like, there's no way. This is so fucking cliche.
Yeah.
And I know him. He's not an asshole. So I was like, okay, what does he actually mean? And I realized, what he means is be confident.
Yeah.
I remember in high school, there was this girl, I really liked her a lot.
Yeah.
And we would be friends and she'd be into me. We'd start dating and then she wouldn't be into me anymore.
Right.
And I remember asking her one time, why?
Yeah.
And she's like, when we're just friends, you're confident. And when we start dating, and she probably wasn't this eloquent, but the punchline was, when we start dating, you fear losing me and you change.
Yeah.
And so when he said, be an asshole, and I put it together, I was like, it was like the sixth sense, and I played my life back to what she said, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, I'm going to be me, And I'm never again going to have fear of loss with a woman.
Yeah, so be you with the willingness to walk away.
Yes.
Yeah, because here's the thing, I see a lot of, the advice online is treat them mean, keep them keen. And I know so many men that follow that advice. It's terrible advice. And the reason why it's such terrible advice is the reality is if you play this game of treat them mean, keep them keen, you'll only attract a broken woman. A secure, healthy woman is not attracted to men who treats her mean.
Correct.
She's attracted to a man who has the willingness to leave if she misbehaves too much. And I don't mean that as a child, just like...
No, 100%. So you have to, everybody out there, you have to become worthy of the person that you want to be with.
Yeah.
So all 10 fingers pointed back at you. Why do you not have the girlfriend that you want? Because you've not earned that person. But then it's not about being an asshole. It's not about treating them mean. But you absolutely must have enough confidence that you're like, this is how I want to be treated. This is how I want to feel. And hey, if I'm not your guy or I don't make you feel the way you want to feel, I fully respect that and I'm going to walk away. You will be shocked if you treat somebody well and then call them up fucking real short if they treat you poorly. Like I remember I had a girlfriend and she started pulling away from me. And so I was like, okay, cool, I got it. And so I pulled back. And she came up to me and she was like, at the time I was thinking about moving to New York, long story, but she comes up, she's like, you didn't even tell me that you were planning to move to New York. And I was like, you made it clear that you wanted more distance. And so I'm cool with that. I want you, for this to be comfortable for you, but don't expect me to lean in as you're leaning out. Yeah. And she was like, oh, damn. Yeah. And so...
super attractive.
Yeah. And the thing is, that relationship ended. Yeah. Because it was like, word. Like, I just did not have a problem. Yeah. And so if you can't, like if you have insecurity in yourself where you're like, as they're leaning away, you lean in, oh my God, you're going to be in for a rough time.
Unfortunately, and this is what a lot of men do, particularly in this generation, the younger generation. They'll pick a woman with all the red flags because she might be physically their type. So she might be posting lots of pictures that they don't like online. She might be going out drinking a lot and all these things. And what they'll do is take her and then try and exert their dominance and be like, you can't go out, you can't post like this. Blah, blah. But the reality is when she knows that you don't have the willingness to walk away, she labels you as insecure. The guy that she's saying is insecure, and the red pill men will say, oh, we're not insecure, we're setting. The guy that she's saying is insecure, and the red pill men will say, oh, we're not insecure, we're setting boundaries. No. Secure men don't need to micromanage. They leave. If they see that you're doing a behavior that's terrible, they simply leave. Insecure men...
I hope they communicate it.
I hope they communicate
it.
So
here's... Going back to if my wife had a 4 terabytes of dick pics, I'm not insecure. I'm not a jealous person by nature, so I do have that advantage.
Have you ever been? Never? Oh, that's amazing. Very good.
I mean, maybe when I was young. I don't have any memory of ever being jealous. Yeah. It's not my nature, but it's not like I couldn't get in that position if I were feeling insecure. But the thing is, you want to, as someone does something that makes you feel insecure, you want to speak up. Yeah. So my wife and I have a rule that we speak in insecurities when we're arguing. Right. So when somebody gets mad, their insecurities have been triggered. Of this, I assure you. Yeah. And so now it's a game of how quickly can you admit that you're insecure. Now, if you're with somebody that will weaponize your insecurities, leave. Yeah. So my wife and I have a rule. You never, and I mean never. I don't care how mad you are. I don't even care what that person does to you. Yeah. My wife could have an affair with an entire football team. And I will never be cruel to her. This is not who I want to be. I'll break up with her. Yeah. I will never speak to her again.
Are you like that in general with other people outside of the relationship?
I have a huge belief. You need to be who you are in divorce and in marriage. Yeah. So there's a quote that I heard that I have let really dominate how I am in life, not just in my marriage, but that you don't divorce the same person that you marry. Right. Which tells me that people code switch. And I don't fucking play that game. Right. I am who I am.
Amazing.
But again, that's all for me.
In general, like you don't speak mean to people. Like say if you're fighting with your mum or your sister or something like that, you don't step out of line and stuff.
I can be very aggressive. Let me be very clear. There are people who would say that I have been mean, but if you ask them to repeat what I said, you'd probably characterize it as aggressive. Right. Because I can be very aggressive. And what I mean by that, because I'm not a yeller, I don't scream, but I will boil things down to its simplest thing, and that can often make people very uncomfortable. Right. When I'm like, so you're saying X, Y, Z? And when you unvarnish something,
Yeah.
you can make people very, very, very uncomfortable.
Okay.
But
in fights with
Yeah.
Lisa, it will never get cruel.
no, never.
Oh,
Literally never, because you can't come back from that.
Yeah, it's true.
And so this is why people have got to build these. You have to build your value system before you get into the relationship.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to people who get so anxious and they get mean and stuff like that? What do you usually tell them?
That's a you problem.
It definitely is a you problem.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing that can't be communicated effectively and calmly. If you are going hostile, chances are you've picked up a fighting system from your parents that involved hurting, that involved going below the belt, and then you're bringing that into your relationship and unfortunately punishing them for a system that they didn't help create in you. So if you have that nature, try your best to work on it, but also try not to partner up with somebody who also does that, because then it turns physical at some point.
Oof.
Yeah, unfortunately.
That has to be completely off limits.
It does.
This is, people have got to decide what
Yeah.
kind of person do you want to be. Not only think about it vaguely, write it down.
Yeah.
What are your values? Like Lisa told me at the beginning of our relationship, if you ever cheat on me or beat me, I'm gone.
Yeah.
And she was like, hard line, no second chances,
Yeah. Don't
no
wanna hear it.
discussion,
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
And knowing how stubborn she is, that would be that.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, first of all, I'm not drawn to either of those.
Yeah.
But I was just like, okay, yep, totally understood.
Okay, yeah.
But also,
What were your deal breakers with her?
I
Same?
never had like big things like that, but cheating would be a deal breaker. If she
Yeah.
ever cheated on me, that would be the end of the story.
Would you say if she hits you, if a woman hit you, would you leave? Or?
No.
I know, and it's unfortunate. I actually recommend men to draw a line when it comes to physical hitting.
Interesting.
But they usually don't.
Well, so here is how I would think about that. So one, I want to be very thoughtful because like that the reason I wouldn't is I don't have an ounce of fear with my wife.
Yeah.
If I was scared of her,
Yeah.
and no judgment, if I was scared of her, then it might be very different,
Yeah.
because I would not stay in a relationship where I was afraid of the other person.
I have a lot of men that have physically abusive wives, that hit them and stuff.
Let me be very
yeah.
clear. Hit me once doesn't mean I'm going to divorce you.
Yeah.
Hit me twice, we have a fucking problem.
We have a problem, and it's not because it's pain.
we will have talked.
Right.
So I don't just mean love like romance. I mean love like when you're fucking vomiting or you're afraid, like I might be dying right now. There's one person you want with you. And when that person is your best friend and the person who you trust and the person you know will run through a fucking wall for you, life does not have anything better to offer you.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm right about that, thinking of that person as your adversary, someone that you need to trick,
Yeah.
is ludicrous.
Yeah.
Now, hear me, boys, when I say I used to show up on the first date with a custom written poem for that person and flowers. I was the caricature because I really believed that's what was going to work.
Right.
And then I asked this guy that I knew was getting laid left, right, and center. And he was gorgeous, by the way. He's like the model. He's the guy that, I forget what they call him, Chads. He was a Chad. He was broke, but he was a Chad. Back then.
Chads don't need to be rich. They just handsome.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So he was a Chad.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is the key? And he said, you have to treat him, be an asshole. I think was his exact quote. And I was like, this is fucking stupid. I was like, there's no way. This is so fucking cliche.
Yeah.
And I know him. He's not an asshole. So I was like, okay, what does he actually mean? And I realized, what he means is be confident.
Yeah.
I remember in high school, there was this girl, I really liked her a lot.
Yeah.
And we would be friends and she'd be into me. We'd start dating and then she wouldn't be into me anymore.
Right.
And I remember asking her one time, why?
Yeah.
And she's like, when we're just friends, you're confident. And when we start dating, and she probably wasn't this eloquent, but the punchline was, when we start dating, you fear losing me and you change.
Yeah.
And so when he said, be an asshole, and I put it together, I was like, it was like the sixth sense, and I played my life back to what she said, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, I'm going to be me, and I'm never again going to have fear of loss with a woman.
Yeah, so be you with the willingness to walk away.
Yes.
Yeah, because here's the thing, I see a lot of, the advice online is treat them mean, keep them keen. And I know so many men that follow that advice. It's terrible advice. And the reason why it's such terrible advice is the reality is if you play this game of treat them mean, keep them keen, you'll only attract a broken woman. A secure, healthy woman is not attracted to men who treats her mean.
Right.
She's attracted to a man who has the willingness to leave if she misbehaves too much. And I don't mean that as a child, just like...
No, 100%. So you have to, everybody out there, you have to become worthy of the person that you want to be with.
Yeah.
So all 10 fingers pointed back at you. Why do you not have the girlfriend that you want? Because you've not earned that person. But then it's not about being an asshole. It's not about treating them mean. But you absolutely must have enough confidence that you're like, this is how I want to be treated. This is how I want to feel. And hey, if I'm not your guy or I don't make you feel the way you want to feel, I fully respect that and I'm going to walk away. You will be shocked if you treat somebody well and then call them up fucking real short if they treat you poorly. Like I remember I had a girlfriend and she started pulling away from me. And so I was like, okay, cool, I got it. And so I pulled back. And she came up to me and she was like, at the time I was thinking about moving to New York, long story, but she comes up, she's like, you didn't even tell me that you were planning to move to New York. And I was like, you made it clear that you wanted more distance. And so I'm cool with that. I want you, for this to be comfortable for you, but don't expect me to lean in as you're leaning out. Yeah. And she was like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
And so...
super attractive.
Yeah. And the thing is, that relationship ended. Yeah. Because it was like, word. Like, I just did not have a problem. Yeah. And so if you can't, like if you have insecurity in yourself where you're like, as they're leaning away, you lean in, oh my God, you're going to be in for a rough time.
Unfortunately, and this is what a lot of men do, particularly in this generation, the younger generation. They'll pick a woman with all the red flags because she might be physically their type. So she might be posting lots of pictures that they don't like online. She might be going out drinking a lot and all these things. And what they'll do is take her and then try and exert their dominance and be like, you can't go out, you can't post like this. Blah, blah, blah. But the reality is when she knows that you don't have the willingness to walk away, she labels you as insecure. The guy that she's saying is insecure, and the red pill men will say, oh, we're not insecure, we're setting boundaries. No. Secure men don't need to micromanage. They leave. If they see that you're doing a behavior that's terrible, they simply leave. Insecure men...
I hope they communicate it.
I hope they communicate
it. So
here's... And we almost give women a pass with it. And I can imagine once in a blue moon something she over-erupted, and I can imagine a pass with that. But some women do it as a form of conflict resolution. And a lot of men don't speak up about it, but I do think...
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
I would never put up with that for the emotional reason that you are out of control.
Yeah, you're just not ready for a relationship. You can't regulate yourself.
Yeah. And self-regulation is very much... That is a tenet in my life. I would not be with a woman that cannot emotionally regulate.
Yeah, and they hit and it's something that's unspoken about. But it is again, it's part of the. When I talked about narcissistic women, it's because we've tilted it where women are automatic victims, and sometimes they are the narcissist in the relationship. I'll always have women come to me for therapy, and they'll say my ex was a narcissist. And when you read her story, it might be that she was cheating on her husband with a guy and saying that her husband's a narcissist, or the guy that she's cheating with is a narcissist. And their perception of what a narcissist looks like is so skewed because they're so holding on to the idea that they're a victim in the relationship. They just want to find a reason. So I do think that if you are with a woman who uses that word a lot and a woman that uses physical aggression, be mindful. Yeah, just because it doesn't hurt doesn't mean it's not a deal breaker.
Yeah, it's very interesting. People...
Unfortunately.
People need to pursue emotional stability. One of the things that I think has made Lisa and I's relationship work so well.
Alright, that about wraps it up for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate the support. Be sure and like, subscribe, hit the bell, comment, share it, tell a friend. Click there, you can watch the whole video. I love you guys. You are loved by the universe. I know you don't like them, but go love them. Go love somebody you don't like. I'll see you guys next time. I love you.